Hello, traveler. Welcome to Echoes of Fate, where every choice casts a shadow and every fate leaves an echo. Have you ever faced a choice so heavy it could break you in two? Two brothers, one chose the law, the other chose crime. But fate would force them together again, in a moment that would change both of their lives forever. The rain came down in fine, cold needles that turned the city into a smear of neon and glass. Officer Mark Hale moved down the alley with his hand on his holster, the radio hissing in and out behind him. Sirens curled around the block. A corner shop bell still rang somewhere, a frantic metallic stutter that said, "Something's wrong. Something's very wrong." A shadow darted ahead, black hoodie, black mask, bag in hand. Mark sprinted, his breath frosted in the air. The suspect glanced back once, misjudged a slick patch, and went down hard. The bag exploded across the wet concrete. Balled cash, pill bottles, a gun that clattered and spun. "Police, don't move." The figure groaned, tried to crawl. Mark was already there, knee on the shoulder blade, cuffs biting down. The suspect's chest heaved. The mask stuck to his mouth, damp with rain. Behind them, Mark's partner, Reese, shouted from the mouth of the alley, "You got him?" "Yeah," Mark called without looking back. "I've got him." He rolled the suspect to his side and, by habit, pulled off the mask and froze. The face beneath was older than the one he remembered. Sharper cheekbones, a thin scar near the eye, but the eyes were unmistakable. Stormy gray, the same as in childhood. The same eyes that had watched cartoons next to him on a sagging sofa. The same eyes that had looked up at him the day their father left and said, "Is he coming back?" The same eyes that had flared with hatred the night they last spoke. "Ethan," Mark said, not believing it even as the name left his mouth. His brother blinked against the rain. For a second, something like a smile, cracked and desperate, touched his lips. "Hey, big brother," Ethan whispered. "Been a minute." The city noise dissolved into static. The alley dimmed, tightened. Mark heard his own heartbeat, a slow, heavy thud against the armor of his vest. "What did you do?" Mark asked, voice low. Ethan coughed, winced. "Same thing I've always done." Survive Reese's footsteps slapped closer. Mark's hands moved on their own, hauling Ethan to his feet, turning him toward the brick. The choreography of 1,000 arrests. But inside, it wasn't an arrest. It was 15 years of silence, crashing into a narrow slice of time. Reese skidded to a stop, breathless. "Clark's hit. Leg wound. Not life-threatening. EMT's on him. You good?" Mark nodded, eyes on Ethan. "Yeah." Suspect secured. Reese leaned in, studying the face. "Mask off?" "Got a name?" Mark's mouth opened, then closed. He saw the body camera light blink on his chest. Steady, red. He saw the gun on the concrete. He saw the alley mouth where anyone might appear. Above all, he saw his mother's hands, raw from double shifts, counting coins on the kitchen table. He saw Ethan at 16, bruised, hungry, angry. He saw himself at 18, taking the police exam because someone had to stand between chaos and whatever was left of their home. "Name?" Reese said again. Mark swallowed. "We'll get it at booking." He shoved the mask into an evidence bag with hands that didn't quite feel like his. Before the paperwork, before the questions, before the chain of custody forms, the past rose like steam off the wet asphalt. They hadn't spoken since the night their mother died. Maria Hale, 2 sons, 1 tiny apartment, 1 oxygen machine no one could afford. Mark had worked patrols and delivered groceries and sold his guitar. Ethan had disappeared for days at a time and come back with his eyes bright and his knuckles cut, saying, "Don't ask." Mark had asked anyway. He had begged. He had ordered. He had dragged Ethan to a church basement meeting and waited through the coffee and styrofoam and testimonies that sounded like sorcery to a kid who needed rent money by Friday. The last time, a fight had torn through their kitchen. Words like glass shards, blame like gasoline. Mark had called the cops on a dealer to scare Ethan straight. Ethan had never forgiven him. When their mother's heart gave out 2 months later, grief turned their anger into stone. Ethan left. Mark let him. Duty filled the space where family used to be. Now duty had brought them back to the same place. The line between right and wrong, drawn razor thin in the rain. At the precinct, Ethan sat on a metal bench with his hands cuffed to a ring in the wall. Water dripped from his hair. A dark stain on his sleeve marked where someone's blood had smeared. Mark stood across from him, an intake form in a plastic sleeve, a pen he couldn't seem to make move. "You gonna book me or sermonize me?" Ethan said, trying for a grin that didn't survive the tremor in his jaw. Mark ignored the barb. "Why, Ethan?" "A clerk got shot. I didn't pull the trigger." "You ran with the gun." "It wasn't like that." Ethan leaned forward, voice low. "I owe some bad people money, Mark. I tried to walk away. They don't let you walk. They said this was the only way. Fast hit, no one gets hurt, in and out. I swear. But Mason, he panicked. He fired. I grabbed the bag and ran." "Mason who?" Ethan's eyes flicked to the doorway, to the mirrored glass, to the camera in the corner. The kind of name that buys you a closed casket if you say it out loud. Mark felt the pen slide, uncontrolled, between his fingers. Clack, clack. "There are witnesses," he said. "There's footage. There's a gun and prints and you," Ethan said. "There's you." The words landed like a stone in Mark's stomach. There was him, the senior arresting officer, the one who wrote the report, the one whose body cam had fuzzed out for 20 seconds during the takedown when the rain got under the housing, the one who could say the suspect wriggled free, fled into the dark, and was lost in the maze of alleyways, the one who could say nothing useful recovered, the one who could send his brother out the door with his life, or into a courtroom with the weight of a felony on his back. "Don't," Mark said, but the plea was for himself. Ethan's mouth twitched. "I've got a kid," he said, and the room tilted. "A kid? A boy. Noah. He's 4. His mum, she's trying, okay? She works nights. He likes dinosaurs. He sleeps with this stupid green T-Rex under his chin, and he asks where I go when I leave, and I tell him I'm looking for treasure because it sounds better than saying I'm looking for a way out." Ethan shook his head. "I messed up. I know I did. But don't make him pay for it. Don't make him grow up like we did." Mark stared at the form until the letters blurred. He thought of his own daughter, Ava, 8 years old, with a gap in her front teeth and a laugh that knocked the air out of him. He thought of her art taped up over the kitchen sink, of her spelling words written in marker on the back of grocery receipts, of the promise he had made the day she was born. "This house will be safe. This house will be different." "Please," Ethan said, and the word was so small It nearly broke Mark's ribs from the inside. Reese tapped on the doorframe. "You good, Sarge? IA's gonna want the footage and the property log." Mark glanced at the red light on the camera station. Recording. At the form in his hand, official. At his brother, wrecked, yes, but also alive, and someone else's father now. 2 roads unfurled in front of him, each paved with consequence. Down one, duty. Down the other, blood. He took a breath that felt like swallowing glass, and chose. "Tell me, traveler, in Mark's position, what would have been your choice?" Ending 1, upholding the law. Mark's hand moved with deliberate care. He wrote Ethan's name where it belonged, each letter neat and unflinching. He logged the gun, the cash, the mask. He pulled the footage, attached the witness statements, and built the strong, clean spine of a case. When he read Ethan his rights at the cell door, his voice didn't shake. Ethan's did. "You're really doing this," Ethan said, laughing once, a sound with no humor. "All that talk about family, and you hand me to the wolves." Mark held his gaze. "I'm handing you to a judge," he said. "There's a difference." "Oh, sure. Judges make great dads. Maybe they make better ones than men who bring guns to corner stores." For a moment, Ethan's eyes went flat and cold. Then something like exhaustion rolled in, heavier than anger. "I can't do time," he said. "Not again." "You can do time," Mark said, softer, "and come out different." The cell door closed with a sound that would follow Mark to sleep for months. The trial crawled forward through plea offers and continuances. The clerk, Aaron Patel, walked into the courtroom with a cane and a shy nod to the jury, his voice trembling as he said, "I thought I was going to die." The defense painted Ethan as a reluctant accomplice, a man crushed by debt and bad luck. The truth, as always, lived in the space between. Ethan took a deal. 5 years, possibility of parole in 3, with good behavior and cooperation. When he turned to leave, he looked for Mark in the gallery, but found only the hard light of afternoon, cutting through the blinds. Weeks later, Mark sat in his car outside a modest peeling duplex and watched a woman fit a little boy into a booster seat. Jess, Ethan's ex, Noah, with the green dinosaur half wedged under his arm. Mark had called first, asked to visit, stammered apologies into the receiver. Jess had been wary, then tired. Then, finally, open. "Do you want to be in his life?" she asked. "Or check a box that says you tried?" "I want to be in his life," Mark said, surprising himself with how certain it sounded. He taught Noah to throw a foam baseball. He fixed a leaky sink. He sat on a too-small chair at daycare graduation and clapped until his hands hurt. When Noah asked where Daddy was, Jess said, "Daddy made some mistakes, and he's learning to do better." And they left it there. Sometimes after bedtime, Jess asked hard questions in a low voice, the kind that tested the joints of truth. Mark answered them with a care that felt like prayer. In prison, Ethan wrote letters full of false bravado and real gratitude. He went to classes. He took the GED. He met with a counselor and for the first time told the story of the night their father left and how the door sounded when it closed. He stopped telling himself that survival was the same thing as living. Mark visited every other Sunday. They spoke through plastic and static and old habits. The first few months were a storm. Then the weather broke. Not because it got easy, but because they both decided not to drown. Years later, when a parole board asked Ethan who would help him on the outside, he said, "My brother," without swallowing the word. The board members nodded and made notes and looked at a man who wasn't finished yet, but wasn't lost. On the day Ethan stepped into the sunlight, he looked thinner, older, but also as if his skin finally fit. Noah barreled into him with a dinosaur roar that made strangers smile. Jess watched from the curb, arms folded, wary, hopeful. Mark stood a few feet away, the weight of his badge on one side and the weight of his brother on the other. Both were heavy. Neither crushed him. "Thank you," Ethan said, and this time the words didn't beg. They honored. Mark nodded. "Don't waste it." Ethan didn't. Not perfectly, not without stumbles, not as a miracle, but as a man. He worked a warehouse job. He made it to all the meetings that mattered. He called when he wanted to run, and didn't. He learned that some doors close without echo if you stop slamming them. Was justice done? Maybe not the kind that makes headlines, but the clerk walked without a cane by spring. The corner store opened its door every morning. A boy slept with a green dinosaur and woke to pancakes and a father who showed up on weekends even when it hurt. And a cop kept his oath, and his brother. Ending 2, choosing blood. The pen hovered over the intake form, then drifted away. Mark slid the report back into the sleeve. He picked up the evidence bag and sealed it, with only the cash inside. "Reese," he said, stepping into the hall. Suspect slipped his cuffs on the wet pavement, bolted toward Willow. I pursued. Lost him at the lot. Camera glitched during the foot chase. Clark's stable. I'll canvass for footage Reese swore, already moving. Damn it. We were right there. Mark nodded tightly, watched him go, then returned to the room and pressed the key into Ethan's cuff lock. "We have 60 seconds, he said. Out the side door, over the fence, into the lot. Ditch the hoodie, the gun, the mask. You never saw me." Ethan stared, breath shaking his whole frame. "You're serious." "Go." Ethan stood. His knees almost gave out. He grabbed Mark's sleeve. "I won't forget this. Don't thank me. Don't look back. Run," he ran. Mark sat down on the metal bench and counted to 90. He could hear the rain, the phone ringing at the front desk, Reese shouting for a unit to sweep the south end of the block. He pressed his palms into his eyes, hard enough to bruise, and saw only his mother's hands, empty. He told himself he had saved a boy named Noah from growing up the way he and Ethan had. He told himself it was a mercy the law could not make. He told himself he would carry it so no one else had to. For a few days, those stories held. Then, on a Thursday evening, the radio screamed. "Armed robbery in progress, Harlan and 5th. Shots fired." Mark's heart fell into his shoes. He drove with lights dark, the way he did when he wanted to arrive before the adrenaline blur wrecked the details. The store window was spiderwebbed with cracks. Inside, a man in his 50s lay on the floor, a red stain spreading beneath him, his wife keening in a sound older than language. Witnesses, a hoodie, a mask, a voice some thought they recognized but weren't sure they wanted to. A getaway car that turned left into darkness. A shaky phone video that caught a profile and nothing else. 2 kids crying on the sidewalk, clutching each other like driftwood. Mark stood very still in the doorway while officers moved around him. He felt his badge tug toward the scene, and his blood tug toward the alley where he had made a mistake look like mercy. At home that night, he lay awake next to Lena, who knew the tremor in his hands without needing to ask. When he finally told her the truth, it came out in pieces, like teeth pulled from gum. She didn't speak for a long time. When she did, her words were careful and terrible. Do you know for sure it was him? No. Do you believe it was him? Mark closed his eyes. I don't know what I believe. That's the problem. Lena turned away. Between them, a thin seam of cold ran the length of the bed. The next day, Internal Affairs asked to review Mark's footage from the alley. Just routine, the investigator said, as if routines didn't decide the shape of a man's life. The camera glitch was real. The rain had done its work. The timeline didn't beg questions, but it didn't soothe them either. The investigator nodded too slowly, wrote too neatly. Mark stood. He didn't slam his chair, because he had decided to at least keep his violences quiet. For months, the case sputtered and smoked. No murder weapon recovered. No clear ID on the second man. The DA built what he could. A jury did what juries do when dealt fog and fear. They compromised. Mason went away for the robberies. The killing sat in a cold file that pretended it would be warmed by the right hand someday. Mark started waking at 3:17 every morning. In the dark, he saw two stores stacked on top of each other like a cruel double exposure. The first with a clerk who went home with stitches and a limp. The second with a wife scrubbing blood from tile. He drove by Jess's building once and saw Noah, small and bright in a dinosaur shirt, jump from the stoop as if gravity loved him. He had never wanted to be held and judged and forgiven all at once so badly. A week later, a tip came in. A crew meeting up near the river. Names. One of them matched a ghost Mark knew too well. Mason. Officers set up surveillance. Mark stood in the van and watched through a cracked lens as men in hoodies passed a bag, a gun, a laugh that sounded like the first robbery breaking into the second. He didn't see Ethan. He wanted to feel relief. He couldn't. Guilt had changed shape, that's all. It no longer looked like a brother. It looked like a habit of breaking rules for noble reasons and hoping the math came out even. The takedown went clean. Mason went down hard. In interrogation, he smiled with chipped teeth and said, "You boys should thank me. I keep your pension safe." "Who was with you?" Mark asked. Mason leaned back. "You think I do charity robberies? People come and go. Faces blur. That's the job. Ethan Hale?" Mason's smile sharpened. "Who's asking?" Mark kept working. He kept going home. He kept waking at 3:17. He kept not calling Jess. He kept seeing Noah on the stoop. He kept not being sure which life he had saved. One evening, he found a note under his wiper blade. No envelope. Just blue ink on a scrap torn from a flyer. "I heard about Harlan and Fifth. Wasn't me. I swear, I'm leaving town. Don't look for me. Tell Noah I'm sorry. No signature, no need." Mark folded the paper until it was nothing. He walked to the river and watched the current gnaw the light. He thought about the first day their father taught them to skip stones, and how Ethan cried when his sank. He thought about the sound the kitchen chair made the night he called the cops on a dealer, and how Ethan made the same sound when he slammed the door behind him. He thought about mercy, about how sometimes it saves, and sometimes it rots. He went home and put his badge on the dresser and told Lena, "I don't know how to do the right thing and keep the people I love." She took his hand. It shook. So did hers. In time, the city learned to live with the questions. It always does. The widow at Harlan and Fifth opened the register every morning and counted the float like a prayer. Noah grew taller. Jess moved apartments. Mark watched every hooded figure like a confession and waited for a face that never turned toward him. He never knew for sure if his choice had freed a father or freed a ghost that would haunt other people's kitchens. That is the worst shape of consequence, the kind that never tells you exactly who you've become. Two brothers met in the rain at the edge of the law, where love and duty cut like glass. Down one road lay justice that hurt like surgery. Down the other, mercy that bled like a slow wound. If it were your brother, which door would you close? Would you uphold the law, knowing it might break your family, or choose family, knowing it might break the law? In the end, every choice casts a shadow, and every fate leaves an echo. Our fire burns low, and the night grows still. Thank you for listening. Return soon, for the next echo of fate awaits.